Good morning, traders. It's Tuesday, May the 5th. Taking a look at the charts, we got the SP 500 daily chart here. This is the futures contract. And yesterday was a pretty big down day in equities, down 1.5%, almost 2% on some indexes, but the market clawed its way back. More or less, we broke this little double top here with a news-based pop, and then we've had three big down days. And yesterday's kind of big down day turned into be a relatively neutral, kind of a mixed session. A couple indexes, Nasdaq was up while the other indexes were down. But today we're seeing a little bit more follow through with another bounce to the upside. And more or less, it looks like we could be starting to form a topping formation. You could argue we've got a potential shoulder, a head, and a shoulder. And if we look at the way the momentum is kind of changing on the charts here, we've gone from a strong move up to a nice bull flag. And then we had another strong move up, and it's kind of turned into a bit of a bounce. And it had a big bout of selling here again, another triple down day to the downside. And then we've seen it kind of go on a nice strong angle to the upside, breaking a short-term double top, and then we saw another bout of selling. So we've gone from a bull flag to kind of a rounding formation with some distribution selling to kind of a news-driven push to some new highs followed by some heavy selling to the downside. And now we're starting to bounce, and the market could start to form a little bit of a bear flag, and we could draw excuse me, a neckline here. We could start to see this break down and pick up speed to the downside going forward. And that's kind of what I feel like is going to happen. The way the price action is kind of changing its tone from a nice bull flag to kind of rounding with distribution to kind of a more of a pop and a drop. And we're into resistance. We're into this big hiccup over here. And if we zoom back on the charts, look at all the price action through here. We've had a lot of price action. So it's a major resistance zone. Now, I haven't showed this in a while. Let's take a quick look at our kind of projected kind of cycles going forward of where price could end up going. Now, if we take a look at the price, you can see here there's potential for the price to move higher going forward. And we could get all the way back up to a double top here. Now, this is the kind of the problem with cycle analysis. Why I haven't showed it in a while is you can get some really big mixed signals, and of course you get the analysis paralysis. So the SP 500 futures is showing we could go up and test these double highs, this double top here, or continue to trend higher. It doesn't mean price is going to go up to that level. It's just the way this cycle gets overlaid, but more or less it means we could continue to trend higher, and it might only trade sideways or slightly higher into that high and then eventually roll over. But when we look over at the NASDAQ, we get a very different picture in the market. And if we scroll forward, you can see more or less it's showing a bit more of a head and shoulders formation, and we could start to fizzle out and go down. This is based on cycle analysis, based on several different cycles, time cycles, and then blended together to give you the overall view of where price may go. So the equities market is in this kind of no man's land, which we've been talking about. It's at resistance. It's showing signs of the increased volatility with the moves starting to show more of pops and drops, meaning there's big distribution going on. And we're not in a bear market yet, but we're not in a renewed bull market. And we've got cycles giving us mixed signals. And that's where we're kind of just in limbo here. We played a quick move up, got in, got out, and now we're cash. And now we're into different asset classes because this asset class is giving us mixed signals. Now, if we go and take a look over at the chart of bonds. Here is the chart of bond futures, and more or less we're looking at the price continuing to fade out of favor here. Now keep in mind that the cycle lines here doesn't mean price should go up here, doesn't mean price should go down here. All it is a bias. If the trend of the cycles are going down, we should see price more or less trade sideways or follow that basis. Now keep in mind, there's cycle skew. I haven't gone over this in a long time, but there's cycle skew. So the major trend of the market is up. And so when you have one of these cycles that more or less is going down, it doesn't mean price is going to go down. When you're in an uptrend, it just means price will become weaker and could just trade sideways and pause for that time frame until the new cycle puts in a bottom and then starts to head up, and then it'll just continue to go up. That's how bull markets work. You don't really want to short in a bull market when you have a cycle top. You want to wait for a new major cycle low, and that's when it releases its energy and start to go higher. So we still have quite a bit of time left. Based on this, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We're probably like 2 weeks away anyway from a potential cycle low in bonds, and once that happens, I think we could start to see them really take off. So the market's going to chop around, and I think it's going to continue to be unstable and really a 50-50 bet of where things are going to go, which is why we're not a huge fan of bonds or equities at this point. But we're darn close to getting some new signals, and we're just kind of waiting to see which way this market is going to break. Let's take a look over at the chart of gold, giving a bit of a similar signal in terms of we've still got about 2 weeks of potential sideways or lower prices. Again, the major cycles to the upside, so overall we got a big move up. This could continue to consolidate. Hopefully it just continues to compress and create pressure here. The more something compresses and trades sideways, the more power it has. I'm not a fan when price gets into the apex. I prefer to see a run up, a ping pong once or twice, 3 times, and then take off. That means it's got higher momentum. Once it gets into the apex here and gets squished, it becomes a little bit of a shakeout. Sometimes you can actually see a sharp drop followed by a quick move, and you get these shakeouts. So I'm not a fan of it getting in here, but overall we're looking for the gold market to start to bottom here over the next week. It should be firming up, and hopefully we start to see a break to the upside. That's probably the same for GDX. Let's just see here. GDX showing continued strength here for a couple more days. Maybe it's going to poke to some nominal new highs, but then it kind of fizzles out a little bit. Now it's had a huge run from the washout lows to the highs. We'll just see how that unfolds going forward. But again, if the stock market does start to crash, we're going to see gold miners get pulled down with them, and that's actually what's showing here. Is the stock market is showing the same thing for the Nasdaq, lower prices for stocks. That means gold miners could get pulled down with the stock market, which is the opposite of what gold is doing. Taking a look over at energies, natural gas up 5% this morning, was up substantially even more. It was up about 7 and change. Overall, we've kind of had this rounding formation. You can see we've got this cycle high, and today the market UNG is set to gap way above our first target, which is awesome. We get more. As long as it can hold up by the opening bell, it always has a way to fade the last hour before the opening bell. But again, really nice move up. We're going to have a cycle high. We're going to hit our first target. All these things are coming together for that. Looks like it'll probably be a 7 or 10% gain. I'll have to take a look. But overall, we're hitting our first target. It's going to be a point where we move our stop to break even. So if it does crash, we want to make sure we get out the rest at break even. Now, keep in mind, we're starting a new, what I think is a new major upward cycle. So if the trend is going higher, this pullback in price may simply be a consolidation. It might hold its ground and then continue to move higher and ramp up going forward. So just because the cycle shows that deep of a correction, it just means price will be under some pressure, and it could just consolidate at a bull flag until we have this cycle low down here, and then we could start to see it ramp up and take off again. Of course, we're breaking above critical resistance today, above the $2 mark. We're holding above there, so we could see this could just continue to take off. But again, this is first level of major resistance. It's the first big breakout. It's a cycle high. We are taking partial profits at the open today. Last but not least, take a look over at crude. I haven't even looked at crude yet this morning, but overall looks like it's got a downward cycle in the market. Here's our negative almost 40 at one point. We just squish this price down. Overall looks like it's starting to get into resistance. Yesterday it did break into this box that we've been drawing. It has broken through that level. Of course, we had this lower box down here, and then this washout low we'll just ignore on the futures contract. But overall, it has popped back into this box. So we'll see how things unfold. More or less, it's put in what looks to be a potential inverse head and shoulders. It's forming up, and now it could trade in this box for a little while. It's going to, I think, build a rounding base, and then eventually I think we could see it break to the upside. But overall, it has broken through resistance. It's now in this fresh box. It could move up to the 28 mark. It probably stay in this range for a little while. But it does have a downward cycle, so I think it could struggle. Maybe it's going to stay in the lower end of this range and ride the support here until it hits a bottom, and then maybe we'll see it push up to this upper level again. A lot of things seem to be about 10 days out, 10 trading sessions out before we start to see cycles top and bottom. So some pretty interesting price action, and we'll just see how things unfold from there. Anyways, that's really it for this morning, and I'll talk to you in a little bit. Bye-bye.